Well, if you think things are bad here, at least we're not Iceland. The president of that country today refused to sign into force a law which would have compensated the British and Dutch governments for the money they spent bailing out people who lost money when the too-good-to-be-true returns offered by Icelandic banks turned out to be just that. Paul Mason is with us again. What happened?
Well, let's just recap how we got here. In October 2008, 300,000 British savers were on the brink of losing their savings because they'd put them into an Icelandic bank, IceSave, an online bank backed by an Icelandic bank. And the Icelandic government itself was on the brink of bankruptcy, so it said, well, we won't bail you out. At this point, both the British and Dutch governments had to bail their savers out, and that cost £3.5 billion. A small sum in the terms of what we've just been talking about, but 40% of Iceland's GDP. Now, after much, and they're not laughing about it, after much wrangling, a bill was passed in the Althing, the Icelandic Parliament, to say, OK, we'll pay it all back by 2024, and tonight the President vetoed it, and this is what he said.
It's steadily become more apparent that the people must be convinced that they themselves determine the future course. The involvement of the whole nation in the final decision is therefore the prerequisite for a successful solution.
So, I mean, are the British going to get their money back? Are the Dutch going to get their money back?
Well, if there's a referendum, there's no chance of them winning it. So at this...
A referendum in Iceland?
In a referendum in Iceland, it won't be won, so they won't get it back that way. There's a standoff, in other words. The Brits will stop the Icelandic government joining the EU. There's an IMF loan, which is now called into question, the rolling over of that. But this is also about Icelandic politics. The party in charge during the boom was the right-wing neoliberal party, which said, fill your boots, sent a generation of Icelanders out to the capitals of Europe to man the vodka bars and the sports car showrooms. And I have to say, you know, there is schadenfreude in Middle Europe about this in politics, because that party is now in opposition and leading this revolt against paying things back. The British government publicly is saying, let's do it, let's be quite quiet and let's be very proper about it. But in private, they're saying to them, you don't pay back, you're no longer a member of the international financial community, and let's see how you like that.
Paul, thank you. And that great primer on Icelandic politics. What are the parties called? I'm not going to ask you.
There is time.
Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson, that's the name of the man who might cost us all several £billion. He's the President of Iceland, not normally a very controversial job, but his refusal to sign a law honouring a commitment to compensate the British and Dutch governments for money they had to shell out to rescue investors who made the mistake of believing promises made by the IceSave bank means there'll now be a referendum in Iceland. The fate of part of the gaping hole in our public finances now rests on the decision of a country with a population the size of Wigan. I'll be talking to Mr. Grímsson shortly. First, though, Paul Mason reports.
It's a tale of bubble and bust, ice, overheating, and neoliberalism. In just a decade, Iceland's Thatcher, Prime Minister David Oddsson, transformed the economy from fish to finance. Everything that could be privatised was. Even the fish stocks were used as collateral. On the eve of the financial crisis, Iceland's banks had $140 billion worth of loans, more than 10 times the country's GDP.
The problem that Iceland has built up has been there for some time and has been a volcano waiting to explode, and it did explode, of course, obviously 2 years ago. But they're now living with the consequences of this, and so therefore they're going to have to manage the debt down over time. There's the problem, though. They've got an economy which is very small indeed, with a huge outweighs it enormously.
In 2008, once Wall Street went into meltdown, it was a matter of days until Iceland followed. Iceland's banks went bust one after the other, but the country too was bankrupt and could not bail them out. With 300,000 British savers' money at risk in IceSave internet accounts, the British and Dutch governments were forced to bail them out, in the process invoking anti-terror laws to prevent Iceland's banks from moving the money out of the UK. Now, Iceland's economy is bust. Even McDonald's has shut up shop there. The right-wing government fell, and after 12 months of negotiation, the Parliament voted in December to pay the money back. Iceland's war with the British Treasury has thrown its international position into disarray. The Brits will now block their entry into the EU. The future of an IMF loan is now in question, and Iceland's credit rating has been reduced to junk. they are one notch away from financial pariah status. The politicians who presided over Iceland's boom now run the country's main newspaper and are stirring up opposition on the streets. To them, Alistair Darling has assumed the status of a Norse mythical demon. But the Icelandic government believes the president's move is unconstitutional.
The decision has jeopardized all the work done by the government to rebuild the Icelandic economy. In its statement to the IMF, it agreed in November to finalize a binding agreement in the Icesave debate, and that is one of the conditions to get further loans from the fund.
Iceland was the extreme example. Now, many countries in the world, including this one, face a budget deficit problem. And once again, Iceland shows how bad things can get if the people refuse to swallow the medicine of austerity. What we're seeing in Iceland is that rare event in the developed world. A government that has lost control of its economic policy and institutions that are in chaos.
Well, we're joined now from Reykjavik by the President of Iceland. Mr. President, this was a deal entered into in good faith by governments. Who are you to wreck it?
I have not wrecked it at all, and there were many misleading statements in your introductions. And it's very important to realize that the law which I signed in September is based on the agreement that we have made with Britain and the Netherlands, where Iceland acknowledges our obligations. And the law that you were discussing, the new one, has come into force and will be in force. The only thing that I have decided is to allow the Icelandic people to have the final say in a referendum, which is in accordance with our fundamental democratic principles.
And the consequence of your decision has already been that Iceland's status, creditworthiness, is reduced to the level of some junk bond entity, to imperil the IMF loan and to imperil also your putative membership of the European Union. I mean, are these good things?
No. That's taken it too far by many miles. First of all, this credit rating by Fitch has really no practical consequences. And the IMF leadership has stated quite clearly that there's no relations between the democratic process which is taking place in Iceland and the excellent relationship that we have enjoyed with the IMF throughout this process. And the discussion about the European Union will take place in the coming years. What you have to realize is that we are a democracy where the citizens have been strongly involved in our political system for decades. We have an election participation of over 90% in every parliamentary election.
All of that may be true, Mr. President.
And I believe that after the great difficulty that we have had here in Iceland, following the collapse of the banking system and the global financial crisis, a national reconciliation and a recovery, an economic recovery, would be strengthened by allowing every Icelander to have a say in this process. Mr. President,
the lesson that many people are drawing from all of this is quite simple. Don't trust an Icelander.
Well, you have to trust the democratic process. You see, in France, in the Netherlands, in Ireland, in many European Union countries, referendums are a normal part of the democratic process. I know in Britain you don't really have an experience of trusting the people with a referendum, but all over Europe there are countries that trust the people with a referendum. And what I decided was simply to follow an honoured European tradition, or allowing the people to make the final decision.
And what about the other part of the democratic tradition, that people elect a government and governments make agreements in good faith, and they are not to be set aside high-handedly by some president somewhere?
Well, the difference between the British and the Icelandic constitution is that in Britain the parliament is sovereign. In Iceland it is the nation and the will of the people which is sovereign. And within the European Union you've had the Maastricht treaties, the Lisbon treaties, which are much more complicated than the treaty between Iceland and Britain and the UK being put to a referendum. So I can't simply see why Britain and the Netherlands should object to this being put to a referendum in Iceland, where much more complicated international treaties negotiated by the European Union governments have been put to a referendum in many of the European countries. And I thought the new Europe we are talking about was not only about market reforms, but was also about democracy and the will of the people.
Let me ask you a very, very simple question. Will the British and the Dutch get their money?
Well, as I said to you in the very beginning, the fundamental basis of the law which already is in existence and which I signed is that Iceland declares that it honors its obligations, and every political party in Iceland agrees that Iceland should honor its obligations, and we should involve ourselves in a constructive agreement with the British and the Dutch governments in order to resolve this issue. And in my declaration 2 days ago, I declared very firmly that the constructive solution of the Icesave debate was a precondition for an economic recovery in Iceland and also good relationship with all nations.
We'll see, Mr. President.
The view which is being put forward that we will not honour our obligations is completely wrong.
All right, Mr. President, thanks very much for sparing the time to join us. Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Good night.